One of the biggest fears I have for my son is that he will grow up and use his faith or his political beliefs as weapons against others who don't think like him. Now, I never thought that I'd have to worry about this, before I had a kid or even kind of immediately after I had a kid. But our current religious and social context is so divisive that I believe it creates a culture where changing your mind is seen as a sign of weakness rather than what it actually is, a sign of intellectual and moral maturity. You see, when the dominant vision of Christianity that my son sees outside of our home and church community looks nothing like the religion of Jesus, I know that this has to be disorienting to him in some way. When he talks about Jesus and what we're teaching him at home, or talks about Christianity and what we're teaching him at home and in church, and he compares it with what he's learning in school, even here in liberal California, there is a tension. And we've already discussed what he was taught versus what he heard in school. And my son's in first grade. So these conversations start young. And so for me, it's something I've had to take more seriously, I guess, or more seriously than I anticipated. Because in our current moment, there is a clear pipeline moving kids towards a kind of Christian nationalist or political ideology that we know really creates barriers to relationship. These kind of binaries facilitate and really embed the kind of political, social, and religious divisiveness that we see in our country today. But we know this is not a pathway towards peace. It's not a pathway towards the beloved community that we are called to create. So what can we do? What do we do? Today's conversation is going to be about how we can really help raise our kids or raise the children that we are around to resist the lure of Christian nationalist thinking. We want to raise our kids to be thinkers, not crusaders. We want to teach our kids to question authority with respect and how to build a worldview that puts empathy and compassion first. These skills are critical if we want to create the kind of community that our children long for and our children need. Not just our children, but all children. So that's what we're talking about today. Thanks for listening. Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christian Podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the kind of Christians who use children as bait to arrest legally documented immigrants and then lie about it. So, if you're curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, and I am your host. I'm a professor of theology and the lead pastor of the Loft Faith community in Los Angeles, California. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Reverend Blair.
That's me. Hello, everyone.
And we have a special guest, Claire McKeever-Burgett. And before Claire shares anything, I want to just read her bio. So Claire McKeever-Burgett is I think it's the third time she's been on the podcast. She is a feminist theologian, a creative contemplative, and author, a spiritual leader who unabashedly centers and celebrates the women of Scripture, because without them, we'd be hard-pressed to have any of it in the first place. Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
We're so glad to have you back. And just honestly grateful for your work. For those of you who also listen to the Loft Sermon podcast, you know that we are right now working through Claire's book before we get to Lent. It's like the perfect, it leads up perfectly to Lent, because so much of what Jesus does, this kind of unsettling that I believe that is made manifest in Lent, it connects with a kind of feminist way of thinking. Like Jesus really challenges these kind of gender, the rigid notion of gender that we have. And so I did the same thing last year and it worked so well. I decided to do it again. So now you got to write a book again for me to use next year.
Working on it.
No. So today's episode, as I said, we will be discussing how can we help prepare our kids to kind of resist the lure of Christian nationalism, and really talking about how we see parenting as a sacred and political act. And with that, I guess as a way to start, the idea for this episode honestly came from Claire. I emailed her. I was like, hey, we're using your book for our current sermon series. This is, I was trying to think of the first sermon that I did, that I sent you. It wasn't Queen Vashti. Oh, Miriam. And I was like, hey, I'm writing about Miriam and her mother. Just let me know what you think when you have time. And then you responded by saying, hey, let's have a podcast that talks about parenting as a sacred and political act. And so I'm just really curious, like, why? Like what came up for you that what made you want to send us this email to have this conversation?
I mean, first, I love talking with you and Blair. I think you're wonderful conversation partners and friends and colleagues. And so if I'm going to have a conversation about anything, y'all are going to be real high on that list. Okay. So,
Oh, thank you. We
you're
mutually
welcome.
feel the same way.
Yeah. Thank you. But yeah, I think more and more just in this living in the United States, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm here in the South. They often call Nashville the buckle of the Bible Belt. I am from Texas, though, and grew up in that religious landscape as well. So just being here and being a politically, theologically, spiritually aware person, and then also raising children, like they got me as their mom. And so they got this, I'm a person and I'm a politically, spiritually, aware mom as well. And so I'm very curious about how we're talking with our kids in this particular time and place. I'm interested in how we're relying on the beloved community to help us, because I certainly cannot and will not do this alone. And how we can do it with, I don't know, as much clarity and kindness as possible, while admitting that clarity and kindness is often hard to come by.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think it leads to one point I wanted to make early on in the podcast. I know we have lots of listeners, and some of you may not have children, but I want you to know that this podcast isn't just for people who are parents per se, but it's really for people who have relationship with kids. And so if you're an aunt, if you're an uncle, if you a teacher, any person, honestly, a therapist is the first thing that came to my mind too. People who have relationship with kids, which is kind of most humans, right?
Ideally, all of us, because children are part of society.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, but this, I think what's going to come up as one thing we're going to discuss is the ways in which children get siloed, and even their emotions and their thinking gets siloed. This podcast is relevant for everyone, in that sense, because I think it's so important in those tiny little moments where you think, if you don't have children, you may not know this, but in those encounters that you have that are 2 or 3 minutes, like when we come back home, like that could really be impressionable on them. And like, that stuff comes up. And so just know that this podcast is really about family, really at its core. It's about family. And so, yeah, I was excited when you sent it, because I've been thinking so much around how do I, not only do I talk to Isaiah about what's going on right now, but also just trying to find a way to help make sure he is aware but not overwhelmed, and also doing it in a way that takes seriously the role of our faith tradition. And I feel like in the midst of everything that goes on, I mean, we all, there's like just getting to school on time every day. Sometimes it's like at my house where you got like, usually it's me and Isaiah, or you got two neurodivergent folks trying to get stuff done. We're just like, it's a lot. So yeah, I was very excited to have this conversation to really kind of talk about how we do this intentionally. Blair, I know there's probably something you want to share in light of what Claire said too. So I'll toss over you.
I'm just thinking too about a lot of the conversations you and I have, Christopher, about how we, as you said, Claire, like you are a deeply spiritually and justice oriented, attuned human being. And so you pay attention to what's going on in our world. And, all of us, I would say, at some point were trained how to do community organizing and justice work and intervention, and maybe have been to some protests, maybe used to go to a lot of protests. And now in this moment, with the responsibility of raising children, it's not even that the priority shifts. I think that's been one of my biggest struggles, is like, I want to still be out in the street, helping my community, being at the front lines of the protest, but I have to figure out how to do that while exposing my children to what is developmentally appropriate for them as best I can, and showing up for them when they need me to show up for them. Cause like I can't go get arrested because somebody has to pick up the baby from daycare, right? Like, and I understand that is the fact that I get to make that choice is a privilege, because for many of our community members right now, like nobody's going to pick up the baby from daycare because they got kidnapped on the street, right? So there's just this tension that I know I'm feeling of like, I want to be doing more. And also raising children is an incredibly political and spiritual activity that consumes so much of my time and attention that it makes me feel like I'm not able to show up for my community in the way that I want to and the way that I know how. And so that's also a tension that I'm wrestling with, is like, how do I include my kids in this? And then also how do I figure out when I'm supposed to step out and when I'm supposed to stay here?
Mm-hmm.
Claire, I'm really curious about how you're wrestling with that too, because I do think, especially the three of us, right? Like we come from, we all have master divinity, like we all are justice oriented, and it's motivated by our spirituality, right? So this is motivated by our sense of understanding of not only who we are, but our connectedness to the sacred. How are you balancing that? Because it is, and I'll say something after you, but yeah, this has been so hard because there's a lot of activism right now that it's just difficult for any of us to attend to.
Yeah, so I push back against this idea that we are not being active, right? If we are in our homes keeping people alive, right? That live with us. And I'm not saying either of y'all are saying that. It's just like I think our world wants us to hang out in a binary, right? In any kind of thing. But like my very breath that I take, right, that helps me ground myself in the love of God, that then helps me take care of my kids, that then helps them show up in school, at basketball practice, at soccer, in the swimming pool, wherever, in hopefully a more grounded, loving way, like matters and is active, right? And so I admittedly am not a protest goer. And really haven't ever been, Blair. Like, I mean, I did a little bit in my 20s, but mostly throughout my life, I have tried to be an outspoken advocate wherever I am and with whoever I'm with about what I believe in and how we can integrate that into our minds, bodies, and spirits in such a way that helps us show up wherever we are, whether it's on the street, whether it's, around a table with our family, in ways that continue to promote justice. Now, I'm a phone caller. Let's set up the meal train. And so that's the other thing is like, and I posted, and y'all mentioned this earlier before we got on here, but I posted something about this on Instagram last night. But my conversation with my oldest kid, who's 10, around some of the stuff that's going on with ICE and everything was, hey, there's hundreds of ways we can show up. Like, not everybody, you mentioned neurodivergence, right? Like, not all of us have the sensory capacity to be in loud spaces and actually like function and be effective, right? And that's beautiful and okay. And so how do we find ways to, strike, for instance, today? I mean, we're recording this on, the invitation to be national strike. Now, what does that look like in ways that make sense to you and are authentic to you, right? Because that's the whole point. It's like if we're doing stuff that's not authentic to us, then I don't really believe it's going to make as big of an impact. And so that is all to say, like, whenever I preach, whenever I write, whenever I have conversations, I live in a neighborhood where I am surrounded by people who voted for Trump. And so that is an interesting it's interesting. I don't know how else to,
You're doing advocacy every day.
Exactly.
Every time you
do the
leave
Lord's
your house
work, man.
and meet your
That's right.
neighbor.
Exactly.
That's
They see
advocacy.
the signs, they see the bumper stickers, and I love them. We haven't had, so many of us haven't had power this week. One of them, I said, hey, come take a hot shower at my parents' house who do have power and they live down the street. I mean, I'm not going to not do that because, right, my faith calls me to love and not discriminate with that love, right? Like now there are conversations to be had, there is accountability to be held, and I truly believe you can only have those conversations and only hold that accountability when you have relationship with people.
Yep.
You're not going to have relationship with people by, I don't know, being, not talking to them, right? So that's
No, I think that's a great answer, and I think and it's hard because I can see. So Blair and I are on the probably the more extroverted side, where we were the people, out. Like I was the one speaking at the not just out. I was like, you know, my family has been I come from a labor union family, factory workers, and so solidarity is just like in my bones. And
yeah,
so when everything happened up through 2020, like the George Floyd protests, like when I was working at the University of San Diego, I was very much involved. Like most of if you were to go to University of San Diego website and look at their framework for diversity, their pillars and how they integrate it theologically, like that's all stuff I wrote. Like it is literally stuff I wrote because I was like, this is what we're gonna do, and I was just super active in that way. And for me, it's been tricky to figure out how to channel that energy differently after having a kid. And I think what I hear you saying, that's such a great invitation, Claire, is to like, I know that intellectually I can do what you're saying, but actually doing it, like actually doing it, like it's so hard because that doesn't necessarily it doesn't feel the same way that the other stuff did. And I know it can, but it doesn't necessarily feel that way. And I think that's important for me to remember, and try to be an advocate like that. And so yeah, that's just a great reminder. Blair?
So I'm curious for the three of us, what have your conversations look like with your kids? How are you helping them frame and understand what's happening? And I don't know if it's helpful to let the audience know like how old our kids are, how many children we have. I try not to use my kids' names on my public facing stuff, but I'm happy to I talk about them, son, daughter, ages,
So I have a 10-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, fourth grade and kindergarten. And because of the 4-year age difference, the conversation is different, right? Because it's different developmentally. I have a smack dab in the middle preteen, and then I have a still a young child, right? He's still learning how to read. But whereas like my son, can read text messages and, can and sees what's happening in commercials even, right? Or if it can look over my shoulder and see what reel I'm looking at on Instagram, right?
And is reading the captions even if you have the sound turned off, right?
Right. That's exactly right. And so the conversations are different. And they're often in the car with me. And I'll give this example. So we pull up to the pharmacy drive-through and we get behind a car that has a Trump sticker and then a Bible verse. Okay. Now, if they had just had a Trump sticker, annoyed, roll my eyes, whatever. But the fact that you have a Trump sticker and a Bible verse, I'm just not gonna not say something about that. And they know me. I'm their mom. They're like, there's mom. Like, we know who she is. They've been to my book events. They've read even some of what I've written, right? And I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. This right here, Trump sticker, Bible verse, like the fact that people call them followers of Jesus and support someone who is okay with people killing people, is okay with hurting women, I could just, the laundry list of things, but this is my, I just am talking on the way home from school, right? And as we're sitting there, and that led me to, with both of them, say, there is something that is happening right now in a state that is very far away from us, but if it's happening there, and it's happening other places. They, of course, are getting the onslaught at this particular moment. But I was like, if it's happening there, it's coming to us. We also live in a state that is okay with tearing apart families, all of the things that ICE is doing. And my 6-year-old, who identifies as a girl, said, Mommy, that's just so mean. And it was like I was like, yeah. Like, if we don't know anything else, right? I think we know how to differentiate between what is mean and not mean. And a 6-year-old knows that. And if you just look at like what's happening and kids being taken away from parents and being pushed down, I mean, that's what we teach them, right? Like at the very base level, like we don't push people down. We don't call people names, like, and so I just thought it was really kind of beautiful that she just immediately got that. And then my husband called, he's on speakerphone, and she goes, daddy, people are being mean. I mean, and she was very concerned, right? And I'm good with that. Like, I want that for her. I want that for my kids. And I am okay with them getting a little overwhelmed by it because it's overwhelming. Right?
It's overwhelming. 100%.
What is happening is overwhelming. And when you love the world, when you love anything, right? Like it's going to be overwhelming. That's kind of the very nature of it. And so I'm real with them about that. I'm like, no, this stuff's hard.
I honestly think protecting them from overwhelm is one of the mistakes that, a lot of privileged parents make, whether it's racial privilege or economic privilege. Like, I couldn't be protected from overwhelm. Where I grew up, like, the overwhelm was everywhere. Like the overwhelm was everywhere, whether it was poverty, whether it was gang violence, whether it was racial violence, racial injustice. Like, so, you have these children who come from those spaces who they get confronted with this as they get older, and they don't know how to handle it, even if they want to, because it is dysregulating. They don't know how to stay grounded in the midst of the kind of chaos that many of us had to be raised in. And so I think that's such an important skill, is to give them, it's like literally like just giving like microdosing of like, this is dysregulating. It's okay. But the more you learn how to increase your frustration tolerance, for those of you, that's the Dr. Becky word. For those of you see the Dr. Becky, I got parenting books for days, man. I'm like trying to, I'm not doing this journey on my own. But increasing our frustration tolerance matters in this regard. Blair, I'm curious, like, how are you? Because you have lots of different stuff happening in your house in terms of like, because you have kids of different age even. So that obviously adds another different dynamic too. They're both kind of young.
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old boy, as far as we know for now, and a 2-year-old girl until further notice. And yeah, we have a rule in our house that we have decided never to lie to our kids. We will do our best to provide information in age-appropriate ways. And we might say, this is a really complicated thing, and I'm not sure you're going to understand. And so we might want to talk about it when you're older. But we always try to address what's going on. Like when we had the fires in LA, and my husband and I were talking about, are we going to need to evacuate? How do we make this choice? When do we go? And they knew that school was canceled. And my son asked me, like, is the fire coming to get us? And I had to take a deep breath for a second and sort of kneel down with him. And I said, how are you feeling right now? And I started with that. Like, I just started with like, you asked a question and I want to check in with you first on how you're feeling. And he said, I don't know yet. Is the fire coming? And I said, well, we don't know. It might be. And he said, I'm really scared. I said, that makes sense. Mommy and daddy are a little bit scared. But what I can tell you is that mommy and daddy are going to do absolutely everything we possibly can to keep you safe. And so we're trying to make a decision right now about what the best thing is to do to keep you safe. And you're not going to have to do anything by yourself. And I've come back to that moment a lot in conversations where he's noticing what's going on. We were driving by a protest in our neighborhood, and he asked, like, why are these people out here? Are they angry? And my husband was the one this time talking to him, and he said, yeah, they are angry. And he said, well, why are they angry? And he said, because our government is doing some things that are really mean and kind of evil. And they want everyone to know that they don't feel good about that. And they want people to know that they're angry about that. And he said, are they angry at me? No. And, we reassured him, like, they're not angry at you because you're a kind kid and you're going to make kind choices. And someday you're going to be part of letting people know when they're being mean that they could choose to be kind instead. So we don't try to shield them from scary things. We try to give them tools and sit with them to process it. And even my 2-year-old, we were having a conversation about whether or not we should go to the No Kings protest, because I was like, that is like a low stake of the one from a couple months ago. It was like low stakes protest. knew they were going to be families. We were going to go to the one in Beverly Hills. So it was like, there's not going to be police presence. Like, but I was like, they'd seen the protests before. They've heard things about what's going on. Like, this is an opportunity to show them, like, hey, we can go out and join our neighbors, to let them know we don't want people to hurt our friends. And my 2-year-old goes, yeah, no hurt our friends. And like, to a certain extent, is she just repeating what her mom says? Sure. Does she also talk about like no hitting and be kind to your friends and I'm not mean? Yeah, she does actually understand what those concepts are. And so as I was verbalizing to my husband in this conversation about how we would talk to them about it, she just overheard it and understood it. And so kids are picking up on these things so much earlier than folks want to admit. And so my choice has been, the more honest I can be and the more intentional I can be about how I talk about these things, the better tools my kids are going to have to deal with it as they grow and choose for themselves how they want to be involved.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Oh, go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, I was just going to say something that came to mind is this summer I was driving back from Texas with my brother. He was helping us, and then like kind of get back from helping my parents, and our kids were my kids were in the back seat. I thought they had their headphones on, staring at their tablet. Well, so Kent and my brother and I are talking about, do we need to move to California? Like, Washington, I don't know, some state that like doesn't, strip our kids of their rights, and particularly our, female identifying children. And next thing I know, my 10-year-old from the back seat goes, Mommy, are we going to have to move? And he was so scared and he was so anxious. And I was like, internally, I'm like, oh, okay. Thought you couldn't hear me right now because, we're speaking very intensely, and I just said, look, like, no, we are not moving right now. I said, but here's the thing. Is very similar, Blair, to what, you're saying. Like, your dad and I, like, it is our job to keep you safe as much as we possibly can, and to protect us, and to keep others safe and protect them as much as we possibly can. And so sometimes for us, that might mean moving somewhere else. Sometimes that might mean staying where we are and voting and calling and, doing the things that we need to do here, because it's not just about us. And so, but this idea of like being honest about my own kids' anxiety, and not only honest about it, but like kind about it, right? Like, not just because I am older, right? Like, I've lived through a lot of this. I have the tools, I have the medication, I have, like these things that can help me, right? But like, just being really aware of that and the way that I'm talking, even when I think that they can't hear, but they're around, right? And what they're absorbing, and then how we can, yeah, can walk through that with them. So
No, I think that's such an honest moment that you have to have, just to be like, hey, my job is to keep you safe. And I think that is at its core, honestly, I think it's what drives a lot of parents to do even some of the things. I mean, I'm thinking about April Joy and the conversation we had with her. So much of what her parents were doing was framed around keeping them safe. But in terms of like sequestering them from the world to an extent, right? This kind of Christian conservatism, where their notion of theology, their notion of God really is like, do you believe in a God that is like where you are need to be shielded from the world and can't engage the world because the world's trying to trick you, trying to like, it's full of demons, everything is trying to make you go to hell? Or is it engaging the world? Like, do you see the world as this opportunity for engagement and where you can demonstrate God's love and compassion? Now, Jesus shows you that it's an opportunity for, demonstrating love and compassion. But so much of a conservative framework is centered around fear of hell. And I think that is so much of the primary motivating factor. And I think that gives me, for me, the space I need to have when I need to have conversations with some people who think differently about this. This is the place of shared values. We both want to keep our kids safe. We both want to do the right thing. Let's talk about what that looks like. And if it's different, what kind of compromises can we come up with? Or where do we, since we have the same goal, let's talk about how we might be able to get to the same, or a place where we can be in agreement, particularly when it comes to like school stuff. But I want to say this, and I want to kind of transition to one more question before we have a break, is like, because Isaiah is Black, like we've had conversations around like so like his first experience of like real racism is when we were in Paris, like, or I should say experience of racism he can remember, when I got put in a different line to go through security because he was misbehaving, and I was trying to tell him you can't do that because of me. I was like, if you do this, the consequences is they're going to do something to me, because I know, because I'm Black. I've been Black my whole life. I know what happens. When you make yourself known. That's why Black folks know just how to navigate a space and just not be seen. And it happened, and it was really traumatic for him. Like the rest of this flight home, he was like clinging to me because he's like, they separated me. They did this extra search and other kind of stuff. And all the people in this extra line that were getting additional security scans were all people of color and Muslim, obviously. And then another, we've had other occasions. I just stopped that because I don't want to belabor this, where he knows when racism is happening to him. And so for us, having this conversation has been, we talk a lot about justice and fairness, like, but I'm an ethicist. And so that should be that's surprising to know. And so we talk about what's fair and what's just. And, I talk about what's happening. Like we've talked about what's happening in Minneapolis because I'm writing my sermons. And he almost always asks me what I'm talking about when I'm writing my sermon. And so these are kind of conversations we can have at least on a weekly basis. But again, he's only in first grade. So it's very much framed around what's fair and what's just and what's unjust, and who's responsible and who's doing things in a way that you would want to. And we talk so much about treating people the way you want to be treated. That's like, that's my parenting go to. I'm like, is that how you want to be treated? It's like, do you want me, and even what he does to me, and I think for him, slowing down and thinking about that has been so helpful for him to cultivate that discernment, right? It helps him humanize people, and now we're going to get to that later. But for me, that's been like critical. And I guess this is the kind of the last question I want to ask before we have to break is like, for me, it's really about like, what patterns are we trying to break, right, in the midst of this, in terms of trying to make sure that, at least for me, that my son doesn't like fall victim, because he's a boy. So if you ever let your kids, I would not tell you let your sons on YouTube right now, but like that stuff is it's like a pipeline to white Christian like male, like it's not good. It's not a good place. And so for me, like, one of the patterns I'm really trying to break with him is around this notion of like patriarchal thinking, is around seeing, because in my family, that is one of the ways in which we practice Christianity, was very much centered around men. So like trying to like disentangle faith from power in that kind of way. It's about actually like taking the time to see women and people of different abilities. And we talk about these kinds of things because both he and I are neurodivergent, and like trying to really disrupt that, to cultivate this notion of seeing all people else create an image of God and what that looks like faithfully. I think that for me has been probably the pattern that I've seen in my family that we haven't always, and even in my tradition, we haven't always followed through on, that I know if he can just pick up on this, like he's going to be so much better for it, and his friends will be so much better for it. And hopefully as a person of faith, when he's older, he's so much better for it.
So I believe, and this is why I wrote the 2 books that I wrote, I really, truly believe that when we center and celebrate women in our scripture and in our faith, and our kids hear that and see that, I think it changes everything. I really do. Because we've had thousands and thousands of years of centering and celebrating men. So to do that for the next thousands and for all these years coming up, and that's why I wrote it. I mean, really, I was like, if nothing else, I want my children to have a book or books that they can pick up one day that do not talk about all the men that we've heard about for a long, long time. Thousands of books about Paul, by the way. That center and celebrate these women, right? And if nothing else, they can do that and pick that up, I'm like, okay, great.
That's awesome.
Great. Or if they can go to my bookshelf and find not just my books, right, but other books of people of color, women of color, who've been doing this work forever, right? Then, that's kind of my parenting goal. The other thing you talked about YouTube, and that's we could do a whole podcast on that. But one of the things that our preteen 10-year-old knows is that he will not be getting a smartphone anytime soon. And in fact, may never. I mean, and we have just normalized that from the get. It's like, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and it will likely be a flip phone or just something that you can connect with us on, but not be connected to all these apps and ways that, because I know the reality, and I do know that those apps and things are kind of this gateway to recruiting, particularly, these white men to Christian nationalism. And so while I don't say that explicitly to him, I do just say, people love to get at you. And and they love, any of us, right? They love to get at us. And that is one of the ways that your dad and I can promote the, protection and safety of your sweet mind, body, and spirit. And so we've normalized that in our conversations around technology. So
I think that's so important. And we've talked a bit about this in terms of the internet as like a gateway drug to to really the kind of
danger.
I suspect once our species dies and aliens come and are excavating us, and they're going to find out all this stuff, this civilization fell because of an algorithm, because the billionaires bought all the algorithms. Like, even the stuff happening with TikTok right now is insane. So, they're censoring. It is. All right. Anyway. All right. Before I start going off on the, as one might say, techno-feudalism that we're living through, but that's my super academic economic term for those of you who are in the weeds. I want to go to a break, and then we'll come back and pick up our conversation. Just like what we can do, actually, like some of the things that we're doing to try to help our kids meet the moment, to train them to meet the moment. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for listening to the Progressive Christians podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you like what you have listened to so far, even if you love what you listen to so far, even if you kind of like it, but you're like, that's gonna be pretty good, we want to invite you to consider becoming a supporter of the Progressive Christians podcast. You can find a link to make a tax-deductible donation in our show notes. A one-time donation would be great, or you can sign up to be a monthly supporter. We have intentionally decided to choose a supporter model because we didn't want to deny anyone access to the great content that we are trying to create in the additional content we are in the process of planning to create. And so to that end, we need your support to help continue to grow this ministry, to expand our outreach to people who maybe don't have access to be able to attend a progressive Christian church, or just don't have people that they can be in conversations with like this. When you sign up, you will receive an email that welcomes you into the Love Your Neighbor Kind of Christians family. Now, we are in the process of creating a newsletter, and we want to schedule our first online event in the next few months. You're going to be one of the first ones to be able to sign up for these kinds of special events. Basically, it's not that we want to give you anything additional that other people don't have access to, but we want to give you first dibs on stuff, and really just to try to welcome you into the family, and really try to say, okay, what does it look like? How can we really help support you in your growth towards God, in your growth in this Christian journey, just in the same way that you're supporting us and this podcast ministry. Now, we have some great ideas, some things we want to create, but we also want to hear from you. So if there's anything, any kind of resources, any kind of events, just honestly, just dream big and say, hey, it'd be great if you guys did an episode on this, or if you hosted a conversation around this, or whatever. Just reach out to us and let us know. We would love to hear from you. You can email us at progressivechristians@theloftla.org, and we will greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show. Welcome back to the Progressive Christian Podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm the capital kind. So, I kind of wanted to make sure we got to the end of our episode and thought a little bit more about like what we are actively doing, or maybe practices or anything people can take away. Even if it's Sunday school curriculum, I don't know. I mean, like whatever we're thinking, we get emails from people who are parents who talk about trying to heal from the trauma of the religion they were raised in, and how we've helped them. We get emails from people who are honestly like coming out is one of a huge thing, but people who are trying to like figure out how to apply some of the things that we talk about. And I know that there are going to be people after listening to this episode are going to be asking the same things with respect to parenting. Like, okay, but I agree with what you guys are talking about, but like, what does that look like for us? Like, what does that look like for you? There are a couple skills that I think are really important, but again, we can deviate and talk about other stuff as well in this last segment. But like, I think really empathy, critical thinking, and how to respect authority and know when to question it. And so, Blair, I guess I'm really curious as to like, what are some of the key things you're teaching? You can start with one of those three, or you can go in a different direction. But like to help your children like cultivate that spirit, so they don't, like I said, I think I put in the email, but so they can be tiny rebels against Christian nationalism.
When I had my first child, we did not know the sex of our baby ahead of time. And when they put him on my chest and my husband leaned over and said, "We have a son," part of what I felt very quickly was the weight of, I am now responsible for raising a white man. And all of the havoc that white men have wreaked, have wrought on our world. And so I have, from the very beginning, been very intentional about how I want my white man to move in the world in relation to other people and to himself. And so I'm doing that also thinking about how I was raised and things I don't want to continue to pass on to my kids. So one of the things about authority that we work on in our household is that we have never wanted our kids to behave us because they're scared of us. So
that's so important.
We don't hit. Important. We try as hard as we can not to yell. Don't always succeed. And when we need our kids to do something, we talk to them about why we need them to do it. And we have boundaries around when we're going to say, okay, you don't get to have a choice anymore. This is where the choice ends. And those things are around, we have to be kind, we have to be healthy, and we have to be safe. And so if your behavior is causing you to be unkind, unhealthy, or unsafe, then I'm going to put a stop to it, and we don't get to have a conversation around it. We can have a conversation after, but we're not going to have a conversation when I say no. And one of the things that we've had to build then, since our kids aren't afraid of us, is we've had to talk about respect. And what does respect look like, and how do we earn it, and who gets it and when? And the way I have found to describe respect to my older kid is, respect is the acknowledgement that you are not trying to control someone else. And I understand that sometimes as a grown-up, I have to control you related to those things, those three things: to keep you kind, to keep you healthy, to keep you safe. But I will not try to control you because I respect you. And as much as I can, I'm going to try to let you make choices for yourself. But I need you to respect me and not try to manipulate and control me. And so sometimes we'll talk about when my son's having a meltdown, or he doesn't want to do something, or he's like hijacking the whole day with his bad mood. We'll sit down and be like, you're allowed to have big feelings, but you're not allowed to have your big feelings control everybody else's life around you. So what can we do to manage your big feelings so that you can continue to respect the rest of the family and participate in what we're doing? And so that's a way that I've found that seems to be working for him, that is clicking with him, is that the idea of respect as not wanting to control other people or trying to control them, because you also don't want them to try to control you. And so it's like a kind of a take on the golden rule that is making sense to him at his age appropriate level of like fairness. Like, if you don't want to be hit, don't hit, that kind of thing. But it was hard. Like there were a couple months where he was really having a hard time listening to any kind of authority, and I really considered started spanking. Like I was like, I am out of options. I do not know. And then I don't know where it came from or how I figured it out, but like really phrasing it around this idea of respect as the refusal to control another, and that worked. And so now I'm just hammering that home and expanding that idea in as many spaces as I can.
I think that's so awesome. And like, you know, one of the things that both of you have said or gestured towards, at least that's important in my house, that Isaiah and I are learning, you know, as we are on our like journey of learning about our neurotypes, is the importance of like nervous system regulation, which is just basically like being regulated, like being grounded, being like. But the thing is, like with, you know, with my son, like if I say, "Are you calm?" or take a deep, like you got to find the things is just like that thing that triggers him. If I say, Isaiah, take a deep breath, he'd be like, I don't want to take, like he will get so angry about taking a deep breath. Like there's certain things that just aren't helpful for him. And so it's so much about teaching him how to regulate so that he isn't reacting to something as much as he has actually taken a pause and is able to like have and act like thinking like and from a grounded position, right? Rather than being than acting out of an emotional reactive state. Because it's not, like you said, having the emotions are fine, but it's when they react out of the emotions. Like I always, when I'm teaching about anti-racism, I use the analogy of the Hulk, right? Like the Hulk, like is just like, it's when you are enmeshed in the anger. Like there's no distinction between you and that feeling, right? And so I'm trying to help him learn, you know, how to be Bruce Banner. You know what I'm saying? You got to like, you got to get separated. You got to have some space between yourself and the feeling, and like figuring out a way for him to, before I do anything else, because otherwise I'm talking to him, he's not able to listen. Like, and so it's how can I help you be regulated in these moments and teach you when someone says something to you to be regulated, and also to like not to behave in ways when you are regulated and grounded. Because I think what happens is we can get addicted may be a strong word, but especially young men can, you know, my son is the tallest kid in the class. Like he's big, like he's skinny, but he's like he's tall. And so it's like he can take up space and he likes to be in charge. You know, he thinks very highly of his intellect. I don't know where he gets that from. So like, so you know, like these are the things that we're trying to work on, but it's so important for me in thinking of like, okay, like how am I teaching him this skill? It's like, hey, if you're regulated, you're less likely to hit someone you're not supposed to. You're less likely to commit domestic violence. You're less likely to like all these things that I know. I mean, you look at the art, like you listen to Stephen Miller. That man's just walking dysregulation. You know what I'm saying? Just a walking box of dysregulation. And so like I guess so for I didn't even think about this in terms of what I'm teaching him, but that has been core, is how to be regulated so that you don't do something you otherwise would regret. And then also how to repair. And then Claire, I'll toss it to you. Like the importance that is something that my family didn't do. And I think it is the pathway towards accountability. Like, and again, so much of what we see happening right now, so like this whole, and I talked about it in the sermon a few weeks ago, where JD Vance says, "Oh, our police, the ICE agents have," I said unlimited immunity, but it's not unlimited immunity, but they have like immunity from being prosecuted. Like, what kind of person is supposed to serve someone else? It has immunity, so they can't be held accountable. Like that doesn't even make sense. Like that sets up a dynamic of abuse. And so how can we like normalize repair? How can we make, when you make a mistake, the repair process be so important so you know that this is just a part of what it means to mature and to grow and to cultivate a relationship rather than a hierarchical power over someone. And that just does so much harm. And so that's for me one skill set that I'm working on. But Claire, I'm curious what you got.
Yeah. Neither of my kids like to have to say I'm sorry.
Mm.
I mean, they really push against it. And I have noticed, I mean, and we're like, this doesn't mean you are bad. This just means like, right? Like we say that over and over again, but it's the open vulnerability that I mean, they're not going to say it that way. Right. But like we watch it and I'm like, right. Like this open vulnerability of just saying, I'm sorry. they're very uncomfortable with. That's something they very much have in common. Sort of this outward expression of any emotion that could be seen as negative or wrong, or, it's like, no, 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 no. And so even though I can tell them over and over and over again, you're not bad, you are good, this is just something that hurt your brother or that hurt your sister or that hurt your mom, or, and so when we hurt people, we gotta find a way to repair. And one of those ways is, not only saying I'm sorry, but also like not doing it again. Right. I can say that over and over again. But where I find that I can be, I don't know, walk the walk, right? Is I say I'm sorry a lot. Like, yeah, I'm really sorry that I just raised my voice and lost my ever loving mind with you, because I am a human being and my patience runs thin, right? Or I'm sorry that I was just really, really short with y'all on the way home. I'm tired. I'm at my end, and I'm still sorry that is the reality right now. My hope, right, is that if I do it enough, and they witness that enough, that, as you're saying, as they grow, as they mature, they can maybe be a little less scared of that vulnerability. So our youngest is dysregulated a lot, like has a lot, and it comes out in really loud, big ways. Okay. And I tell you what, the spiritual formation that my husband and I have undergone with parenting that child is, and I mean it like at the deepest, most sincerest part of me, is the most important formation that I have been through in my life. And
Wow.
I've been
Yeah,
through,
yeah, I mean, you have, yeah, I'm like, wow, that's wow, wow.
but like, and I mean, cause I do not show up in the world as a patient person. I mean, that's not my number one thing at all. I'm like, let's get it done. Right. Like, and the patience that I have grown in that fruit of the spirit, quite honestly, is really beautiful. But one of the things that I do with her when this is happening is I get on the ground, like on the actual ground. And I know like this is a I think widely known parenting strategy, but just I get on the ground with her. I do not stand above her. I just like get on her level. Even when she's pushing me away, even when she's telling me that she hates me, even, I'm like, I hear you and I don't believe it. I said, I don't believe that. Like, I'm not going to believe your hatred. I just don't, I'm like, I know you're saying that. I know you're upset, but like, I know that is not true. And we're going to get through this together. And so it's been that's also very formative, right? But just to get on the actual ground. And then the other thing I just want to say is like, I have the capacity and the time most days to do that, right? I have every resource available to me in terms of health insurance and medication and access to Vanderbilt healthcare, which is incredible, and can send, my kids to therapy and to occupational therapy that helps with sensory things. Okay. And I am acutely aware that is not the case. And so I think when we're talking about regulation, dysregulation, it's an important thing to name, not to feel bad about the fact, like we need more regulation in the world, right? Like we need more groundedness. And I am a huge advocate of that. But just to also name that it is also true, right? That not everybody can, given where they live, what they're struggling with, how that, right? That doesn't mean then, we're not supposed to be. It just means like, hey, let's have this awareness as we are able to, spend the time, the 30 minutes on the ground with our kid while they're screaming, while others just simply cannot, because they have to get in the car and get to work by 8 a.m. or they don't have a job anymore, right? So that's just like in these parenting conversations, and particularly in very white parenting spaces, I notice this assumption, right, that we just all can like do this. and and all can just like show up in this like really calm, like beautiful way.
And it's just
And
it's not possible
Yeah.
because people have it.
Poverty is dysregulating. Food insecurity is dysregulating. Taking public transportation is dysregulating. Not getting enough sleep or having a safe space to sleep is dysregulating. Like when
Feeling
you
like
are
you're about to get kidnapped is getting dysregulated. Yeah,
absolutely. When you are living with intense challenges, you live with a heightened sense of emotionality and neural stimulation, and that makes doing these like gentle parenting things that we're talking about incredibly difficult. If because you can't, like, how can you regulate yourself to help regulate someone else? I mean, there's therapists all over right now saying like, you're not depressed, you're just poor and living in a collapsing post-capitalist society. Like that's a real thing.
Oh God.
And also, to a certain extent, we're all experiencing a certain level of that. So then how can we find and embrace these micro practices that help us be kind to ourselves and to one another and to our children?
I mean, I think, this is where I think like communal parenting, I guess for lack of a better term, is so helpful. Like my grandparents did the best they could. Like my grandparents on my mother's side lifted my mom's side of family out of generational poverty. My grandpa worked 2 jobs. He learned how to read as an adult to get a promotion in a factory, which really allowed him to be able to buy the first house my family could own on my mom's side. And my grandma was a stay-at-home mom who like watched other people's kids, both her kids and also the family neighborhood kids, black and white. And I think if you were to ask them, like how well of a job they did, my grandpa really couldn't articulate that much of it because he wasn't around that much, and my grandma has since passed, and she had a stroke when I was a kid and couldn't really talk about it. But what my grandpa did do is by the time we were kids, like they had got to a point in their life where they could be, I think, the parents they would have liked to have been. And they really did that to us. Like my grandparents take place at a formative job. And so where my mother was experiencing all kinds of crazy BS, sexism, racism, and even as a kid, I knew that she was experiencing, I didn't understand sexism, but I surely understood racism. And I would see it and I would be like, this is messed up. My grandparents were teaching us how to, and we were poor, and my grandparents were teaching us how to regulate, especially in my family, through music. And Claire, and so like this is the thing, like I can't even really start talking about it because I cried on the podcast last time. I can't be crying every podcast we have, but like sometimes we'll hear spirituals, right? I'll hear songs. I'm like, this is like, they walk around the house humming and singing all the time. When I was upset so again, in hindsight, I would have been diagnosed with multiple neurodivergences had we have access to all that stuff you're just talking about, Claire. We didn't have any of that when I was a kid. I was just hyper and like smart in a way that people couldn't really understand and I couldn't articulate. And now we know what all this stuff means. And she would see me having such a hard time and she would just hold me because physical touch helped ground me. Or like, she would like I draw because my grandma at this point, she couldn't really write that well. And so she would have me help her write things. Like she, in her own very practical ways, knew how to help me stay regulated, and she could see me getting dysregulated and help me stay. And my grandfather, same thing with music and with being outside, like they would just see it. And like, so like, especially, I can't speak to any other tradition, but I'll tell you, like Black church, tradition, that's what they did. And like, but the thing is, this is why it's so important to have grandparents and other people around. We're talking about how parents isn't just like you're like, if you have other people around, shouldn't have to carry the burden, right, of doing that all the time, because you can't, because you have so much to do just to survive. But if other people are there and can show up, Julia's gonna listen to this podcast. I know even though she's not on it. Like Isaiah, like we talk about Julia all the time. And when Julia's over here, Isaiah is more honest with her than he is with me about stuff, And so for me, I think this is it. It really emphasizes the importance of community and why we can't do this and we shouldn't do this alone, because it helps teach them these skills. And even still to this day, music is my family know if I'm in here listening to gospel music, something happened, I am regulating. Like I am regulating myself.
Don't you love how beautifully subversive the divine feminine is? Because, right, singing is the language of the divine feminine.
Absolutely.
And here she is showing up in your home, growing up, and you would have never named it that way. I mean, that's how it was with me and being Southern Baptist, but I know that hymnal.
Yeah.
And I know those hymns, right? I don't memorize many, but like I can still sing a theology that I don't believe in anymore because the notes, right? The rhythm. I mean, yes, like I think that's so beautiful. And then also I think I want to say this. I think another like practice, right? I don't like the word strategy all the time, but I act as if God has always been feminine because she always has. And so we do not refer to God as he. We are going, if we're going to use any pronoun, which I believe God is beyond our human constructs of pronoun, but if we're going to use any, we're going to use she and we're going to use her. And that is for lack of a better word, rule in our home. And then we also attend a church with a woman as a pastor. And that is just something that is very important to us. And while the church community, I'm never going to believe is going to be perfect. And I've kind of given up on this idea that like, I need to go to church to like, be happy and feel good. What I haven't given up on is the power of the community of faith.
Yep.
And the fact that my kids get to hear a woman who's not me, right, preach every Sunday, and they get to hear other people refer to God as mother, God as she, God as the womb of our creation, right? I'm like, okay, great. That's beautiful. Like, sign me up, like, and so I think those are important practices too. And I love that this space, as you were talking earlier, the Progressive Christian Podcast space exists for the people who don't have access to that in their community, right? Like, that is one of the beauties, right, of technology and of internet. And I mean, being able to share these things is that there are these like beautifully sacred spaces that folks can join even, when they can't join it in person. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're almost at time, so I don't want to wrap up. But there's a couple of things I want to do some quick hits before we get out of here. Is I know, so my family doesn't really live close, and so like I don't have that kind of like bloodline support. I have family that has come from the church, but a lot of the things that the things I'm learning about how to kind of reparent myself and even when I use the term nervous system regulation, I should say like I listen to a lot of helpful parenting podcasts. And so one I want to give a big shout out to, especially for those of you, if you're listening, you're like, I have neurodivergent children, or I am neurodivergent. It's called the Beautifully Complex podcast, which is so good, but hosted by Penny Williams. I absolutely love it. Like it's just not like, doesn't talk down to you. It's not like, it's about a mom who has a neurodiverse kid, and just her experience of just even navigating the schools, even the stuff she has on there has just been amazing. That's been super helpful. And the other one is I don't really love the name, but it's called The Baffling Behavior Show, but the subtitle is Parenting After Trauma. And I was like, that's what got me. And I was like, okay, both of these have been so helpful to understand things my grandparents intuitively knew. You know what I'm saying? Like they knew when I was dysregulated. They knew how to help me focus to get my work done. They knew like if I was trying to get homework and I was struggling, my grandpa would be like, hey, I need you to go outside and do some of this stuff. And I felt like he was giving me chores, but he knew I needed to burn it off. He knew I needed to burn it off and I could come back and I could say, like, it's just, anyway, like in hindsight, I'm like, there is this wisdom. And it's funny, we're talking about that chapter in your book this Sunday, Claire. We're talking about wisdom. Like there's this wisdom that is there that they knew, that they passed on to me, and I greatly appreciated it. And the last thing I want to say, because I really have to emphasize this because it's so important, empathy. The language around a sin of empathy is so BS. And what we see happening right now is what happens when you allow people to see other people as, to not even learn about them, because you say, don't fill your mind with stuff from the world. These people are evil. And you allow them to be seen as sinners and less than human, and they're being punished because they broke a rule, quote unquote. Like teaching Isaiah to be empathetic and actually like really see other people as full human beings, like genuinely, the parable of the Good Samaritan, like literally seeing that, for me has been, I think that is the pathway for many of us people of faith out of this, right? In terms of reclaiming Christianity in a way that is the religion of Jesus, that is about abolishing the systems that created this hell on earth, that many of us feel like we're living through. Blair, I want to toss it to you to give the last few words before we wrap it up.
Oh, I think related to empathy, it just comes back to the golden rule, right? Treat others as you would want to be treated, and use that. Like the one way I get my kids to stop whining is I whine back at them, and they go, "Stop that!" And I said, "Oh yeah, it doesn't feel good, does it? It doesn't feel good to be whined at. So if you don't want me to whine at you, don't whine at me." And they can get that. Again, my kids are preschool age and TK. Like, young kids can understand that doesn't feel good to me, and so I shouldn't do it to somebody else. And my Lord, if we could just get the world to do that, we'd have a totally different society.
100%. 100%. Well, we want to wrap up by having a few pieces of good news that we are making sure we want to say, just so we cannot end on a downer. So we are recording this episode on January 30th. It will be published, this next Friday, which I can't do math and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
who knows what will have happened in our world between now and then.
Who knows? But hopefully the good news will still be good news, but hopefully there'll be less bad news. And so for those of you who know that all this stuff happening in Minnesota is about quote unquote immigration and catching illegal immigrants, and the ways in which they're framing this as these immigrants have committed these kind of like heinous crimes or felony crimes, when in fact these are misdemeanors technically. And so they use this language around policing to justify violence. And they've done it such a way that they've actually, I think it's over 1.5 million people who were here legally are now here illegally because of mechanisms put in by the Trump administration to like basically remove their status. Like literally, like people came here the quote unquote right way, and we've done the opposite and pulled the rug out from underneath them. So now they're scared. Whereas you could learn from Spain, which is the good news. They have approved a legal pathway for 500,000 immigrants to gain residency and begin a pathway to citizenship. Right? Like to me, this just makes sense. Like give people a chance, right? Give people a chance, like to say, hey, you're here. Let's find a legal pathway. And that's how this is about other stuff. Quite honestly, it's about racism. It's not about a legal pathway or people who came here the wrong way. It's about people's racial anxieties. And the second piece of good news is there is a revolutionary therapy that has been working to treat what has previously been understood as untreatable blood cancer. And we have a link in the show notes about that. And that's like, again, my wife is an oncologist. And so we are very much tapped into like a lot of stuff that happens in this field. And lastly, a California court hears 2 cases to protect kids from the effects of social media, which I think really, really matters. We're just talking about that because of just the dangers of what we know this is doing to ourselves and to our young people. Claire, thank you so much for sending us the email to have this conversation. Like, this is amazing. We're so excited and thankful for having you here.
Thank you for having me and for being such beautiful conversation partners. And to those who are listening, just know that we can keep the conversation going, because I do believe it's one of the most sacred and important ones that we need to have.
Claire, how can people like find out more about your work? I know you got a website, you got social media.
I'm on Instagram the most. I've got a website where you can find information about my books and my work to unabashedly center and celebrate women. And yeah, those are typically the best ways. And Substack, I write weekly. You get it first thing Sunday morning, all about women and our faith and spirituality and how we can hopefully begin the week grounded in the power of love. So
breaking the patriarchy. That's the best way to start on a Sunday. I want to say again, we are trying to put together something where we can have Claire. We're trying to put together our first in-person event for those of you who are, local or trying to maybe schedule a vacation around something we're trying to do. And Claire is going to be one of the guests we have because she's been very influential in the work that we do on this podcast, and she's just been a great friend and conversation partner. And because the work she's talking about, so I mean, the thing about our podcast is it's grounded in church. Like it really is. Like we love church, and we want to help evangelize, to use Blair's terms, and not Blair's terms, but her focus,
Reclaim the
right?
word.
Exactly. And so like that's one of the things that we love about, I love about your book. Like it's just it's for people who are committed to worshiping together, which we call church. So your books, I should say, plural. I don't want to copy out. I got two. So yeah, I am going to read the outro, and we want to invite you to stay tuned after I read the outro, because Blair will close us out with a poem that really, we think, encapsulates the conversation we've had today. So I want to thank you for joining us for the Progressive Christians Podcast. The Progressive Christians Podcast is the ministry of The Loft, a worship community of Westwood United Methodist Church. If you'd like to connect with us and be part of the conversation, you can find us on all social media platforms at The Progressive Christians. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at progressivechristians@theloftla.org. Our show is produced by our amazing producer, Spencer. Shouts to Spencer. And is mixed by and edited by our wonderful audio engineer, AJ, who's always holding it down for the team. Please rate, review, share, subscribe. Please consider being a supporter if you haven't already done so. Thank you to those of you who already have. We love you, and we will see y'all next time. Bye.
I'd like to fight for human rights, but there's dishes to be done. There's wars to wage on bedtime, and there's laundry to be run. I want to scream and protest at the death, the blood, the loss. But the bus comes in a moment, and we've lost another sock. I want to feed the hungry. I want to house the poor. I want to show our neighbors that they're worth fighting for. I slept only a few hours, and my mind is drifting off. Food is too expensive, and the baby has a cough. I knew a child without a country, a stranger in his land. No papers of permission. He had nail marks in his hands. Father, forgive them, for they have no visa. There is no room in the inn, not with the politicians busy with their more exciting sins. I'd like to march for freedom, to stand where brave ones stood, to shout against the tyrants who called their cruelties good. But everyone needs dinner, and the bills are overdue. So I raise my voice in whispers, and I teach my kids the truth. I cannot light the barricades or storm the steps of power, but I will raise up children who will see the final hour. I'd like to make a difference, to make them stop and think. I'd like to save our country, but there's dishes in the sink.